YouTubers, and welcome to a Doctor Who custom video. This is the first one of these I've done in absolutely ages. I think the last one I did was Benton and Perry. I've made a few customs since then, and the Dark Eyes 8th Doctor was one of the key ones that attracted a lot of attention, and lots of people were asking me, how did I make this version of the 8th Doctor? So I'm going to talk you through how to do it. Now, there are a few variations of this figure, because it is a figure that lots of people have had a go at making, because lots of people like this look for the 8th Doctor. And I've seen people use things like the Kudlak body from Sarah Jane Adventures, one of the guys from Primeval, even the 9th Doctor for his leather jacket, that kind of thing. I didn't use any of those things. All I used to make this version of the 8th Doctor was this version of the 8th Doctor. That is all you need. You don't need to buy any other additional figures or anything like that. If you want it to look like my one, all you need is this fella. So I'm going to talk you through how I did it. So let's move Dark Eyes McGann. Let's move him over here. And let's bring the normal 8th Doctor into the centre. So I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, well, that is quite a huge leap from this to this. But it all makes sense when I talk you through it. So the first thing that I did was removed the 8th Doctor's head. The good thing about this, no boil and pop. The 8th Doctor figure does have a removable head, and it pops off like so. Lovely, simple. So once you've got your headless 8th Doctor, the next thing you want to do is remove the shirt and waistcoat piece. Now, if you look up here, you can see that there is a peg in the middle, but this is actually quite loose. All you need to do is get like a little nail file or something, metal one, and just peel that off, or you can do it the other way. You can peel it off at the front. So you just have to pull open the coat and then peel off the waistcoat and then over the peg at the top. So what you'll be left with is a bare torso and then this coat. Now the coat that you see on this figure is in actual fact this very same coat, but it just needed a lot of modification. So the first thing to do was to chop the bottom of the coat off to make it just sort of thigh high. The next thing I did was remove all of the details. So all of the buttons were sanded down, and all of the lapels were also sanded down. So all around here and all around the back of the collar. I also removed the button detail on the cuffs of the back of the Doctor's wrists. So what you would then end up with is a very bare looking frock coat and a very bare looking torso. So if we move to the actual figure now, and we'll just take off his satchel, which I shall also come to a bit later, we can get a better look at how I did the coat. So as you can see, you have all of this extra detail here, which you don't have with the actual coat that we're using. So you need to build this up. Now I did this in a particular way. I used milliput, and I also used a rubber gardening glove, of all things. And I'll show you exactly what I did. This section here is the rubber. Now, you're probably thinking, well, why did you do that? Why didn't you just make it all milliput? Well, there were a couple of reasons. One, trying to put milliput here was going to be very difficult because obviously this piece is all open, and it would have been really tricky to try and make it flat without just making it incredibly thick. So I didn't want to do that. Up here, this is milliput, but that was different because you have the torso to actually build the milliput off of. So all I did was got a piece of this PVC gardening glove, and I cut out a small square, and I can show you the exact seam where it ends, across here, across the two buttons. And if you look carefully, you can actually see the line from the seam of the original coat sculpt. So you can just see where it is. And if you hold it into the light, you can just about catch where the seam ends from the PVC to the milliput. So that was the first thing that I did. Cut off the square, placed it on there, and then I glued it down this side, and I glued it across the top. with super glue, and that then made it nice and secure. Now, of course, then we had this bare torso and this square patch here. So that was when the milliput had to come out. So the milliput was then sculpted all the way up to the top and sculpted all the way around the side. And this was then sculpted in as best as it could, as smoothly as I could, into the main part of the coat to make it look like it was all one piece. So you can see it doesn't look too bad. In certain lights you might just catch a slight line, but for the most part it covers it pretty well. Well, at least I think so. And what I also did, just to give it an extra bit of depth, I sculpted this lapel first. So you can see this is all brand new sculpt. This just went straight across like that. And then from there, I built up this other lapel here. And again, that was all milliput too. And if I just spin him around, you can see that it is lifted off the body. And the reason for that was so that the strap of his satchel could then sit beneath the lapel, just like he wears it on the cover to Dark Eyes. And when sculpting this, additional details were added. So there's a bit of a seam sculpted in. There's like a little square bit here, which is another part of the seam. So those little things were added in. Of course, another thing that had to be done was to build up this part where his t-shirt is. This piece on this version of the figure actually holds the head up high. And in removing that, you do have that big gap. So it was a case of just trying to build up the milliput between the gap of the head and the gap where there was no more shirt. And it just took a few goes. You know, you had to be careful not to get any milliput on the head so that you weren't getting the head to stick to the shirt, because you still wanted the maneuverability. But it is quite simple, and I just kept adding to it and just very gently making sure it sat all right. And then once that was done, I've just added the buttons on the front, and that was 6 buttons. I also, just to make it a bit more accurate, made sure that the final button was beneath this bit of PVC. So it looked like the Doctor hadn't done up that last button on his coat, because Paul McGann does seem to wear it that way in some promo shots. Some shots he does have it just open, but the strap of his bag holds the coat together so it looks like it's closed. So it's up to you. Now, one thing I did omit from my version was the lapel that goes around the top, because he keeps his collar up high. Now, the reason why I didn't do this, and I did try to do this, is because the milliput just didn't want to stay flat, and it just didn't really want to, it didn't look right sat around his neck. It just looked like he had some sort of weird scarf thing going on. So that's why I omitted that. People who use the Kudlak body, their version looks a lot better, but again, I'll be honest, it still looks a bit funny. I don't think it really works quite well, but that is really down to you, whatever you want to use. You might find that is a lot easier than building stuff up with milliput and sculpting things. Of course, the problem there is you may not be able to do this with the lapel, but I have seen people who have just sort of cut the lapel off slightly with a very thin knife. Just get in there just to put the strap under the lapel. Now, the final part is the Eighth Doctor's head. Now, a lot of you probably have the War Doctor figure, which came with the Eighth Doctor's head. Now, that head is from Dark Eyes. I don't care what anyone else says. Some people say it's from Night of the Doctor. They're wrong. It is unequivocally from Dark Eyes, and you can just tell because the haircut's different. So really, you don't need to do this. You can just use that version of the head. But if you do use that, take note that the neck peg is a lot longer than the one on the standard Eighth Doctor head. So therefore, if you use that head, you won't need to build up quite so much of the white shirt. But if you want to know how I did it my way using the original Eighth Doctor sculpt, very simple. The hair, well, that comes off. This is actually a separate piece. This was stuck in boiling water and then peeled the hair off. It does take some time because it's glued in there pretty tight. You need to really hack at it to get it off. So if you're a younger person, you might want to get an adult to help you with that. But you have to be very careful because you don't want to damage the head itself. You just want to pull the hair off. So be very careful. Lots of boiling and popping. Use a hairdryer to try and melt that glue down, loosen it all up, and then just try and dig at it with whatever implement you can find. So once that was done, it was then just a case of rebuilding the hair using Milliput. So you can see how I just followed the shape of his head. I just covered over the bits of the ears that were missing because of the longer hair. And then I just very carefully used a safety pin to add in the detail of the hair and to help shape the detail of the parting. And then I also added in a slight squiggle of hair hanging down. What I also did, because obviously the Eighth Doctor by this point is played by Paul McGann as he is now, so he's in his 50s compared to in his early 30s or whatever he was when he was doing the TV movie. So I did make him look slightly older, and if we just compare the two heads together, you can see that my Eighth Doctor is slightly linier, especially around the mouth and around the eyes. And again, this was done using a safety pin. So I just very carefully made the scratch marks around his mouth, under his eyes, added some crow's feet along the sides. And then once that was done, it was just simply a case of painting it. So that was very simple. Obviously the shirt was white, the hair was brown. I then added a little wash of black over the top just to give it a bit more depth. The coat was painted a dark blue, and then I dry brushed black over the top of that just to give it a more battered leather look. And that's the funny thing with this coat, because in some pictures it looks very black, in other pictures it looks kind of blue. So that's why I did it a mixture of the two, so that it looked sort of bluey black. And then all of the buttons on the front and on the back were painted gold. And then for the jeans, they were just painted light blue. And then again, kind of like I did with the leather jacket, I used white paint, and I just gently dry brushed those over the top to give it a denim-like look. And lastly, his shoes were painted a sandy brown colour. Now I have seen other pictures of him where he's wearing black shoes, but I decided to go with the sandy brown shoes, which is what he wears in the Dark Eyes photo shoot. And we also have the satchel. Now, I didn't make this. This is actually from a Primeval figure. Now, I can't tell you what figure it's from. I think it's from one of the women. But this was just something that I happened to pick up in a job lot of Primeval figures. And I thought, ooh, that would be very useful for the Eighth Doctor's satchel. Now, his is actually more of a tan colour, not green like this. But I was happy enough as it was. I didn't really want to go through the faff of trying to paint it. But as you can see, it hangs perfectly well, and the strap then sits snugly under the Eighth Doctor's lapel. And then the sonic screwdriver was simply the Fourth Doctor's sonic screwdriver with the sonic emitter snipped off, and then the gold band and the blue crystal were all sculpted from Milliput. To be honest, this is the bit that I was less happy with. It did the job. As you can see, there's some paint rub where the brown's coming off. That's just from filming, taking it out of his hand, putting it into his hand. So that is something that you can look into. I have seen people use the 11th Doctor sonic screwdriver, which does seem to work a lot better, but I didn't have a spare one. So you might want to go down that route, use that, alter it slightly. So as you can see, the figures look remarkably different from one another. I have had a lot of people be very surprised when I tell them that the Dark Eyes Doctor is actually just the Eighth Doctor, just tweaked and jigged about. But that's it. That is how you do it. I'm afraid I don't have any work-in-progress shots because I never took any. But I hope that you might have some understanding as to how I did it. And yeah, feel free to have a go, see if you can do it, and you know, just don't use the recipe exactly as I've used it. Feel free to tweak it if you can work out how to do that bit of collar around there. Fair play to you. Like I said, the sonic screwdriver, that could do with reworking itself, and you could always repaint the bag. But that is how I made the Eighth Doctor from Dark Eyes. So thank you for watching this custom video, guys. If you'd like to see me talk about some other customs, then let me know. I do know that people often ask, you know, how did you make that? Could you show us how to do this? I am actually working on a few other customs at the moment. So this is one that I'm currently making. Very early stages at the moment. Most of the sculpting has been done. There are a few additional things that need to be done to this figure. You may be wondering who it is, but maybe that will help shed some light on the situation. And there's also this chap who is in the very, very earliest stages of development. I have a lot of work to do on this guy. You may be wondering, who's this going to be? Well, I'll give you a clue. He's also from Dark Eyes. So if you know of a certain bold character from the Dark Eyes saga, you'll have a very good indication as to who this is going to be. Again, let me know if you want to see exactly what I'm doing with the other figures that I'm making, and if you want me to talk about any previous figures that I have produced in the past. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.